That's fine. No. Yeah. No,
Why would you say that?
Everyone on Zoom, we're gonna probably start in like 5 minutes just to get everyone settled, okay? We'll start like 10 minutes late, guys, just because otherwise it's gonna be awkward, and we're always late, I know that. So the only reason I was on time was I was petrified I'd go over the GW game, so.
All right, let's read Monday.
Does anyone have real estate investment property in the room? Couple. Cool. Alicia, just give me the word. What do you think we should get?
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
A couple more minutes.
Yeah, 4 minutes.
Did you bite? Remember what's in front of you?
Yes. That or they don't want their head in the back of their head on Zoom, I guess.
Maybe think you're so serious.
Yeah.
You guys can have fun with Jeremy.
I'm pretty serious, guys.
Yeah.
Well, this is like the second time I put a sport coat on in the last 3 years. That helps at all.
And yes, right?
So our dry cleaner doesn't show up at our house anymore. So like my wife takes our dry cleaner to our neighbor's house next door. That's how bad it's gotten. So because otherwise it just skips our house. It's like it'll be like 3 weeks no dry cleaning. So that's pretty great.
You just,
It's not a bad thing. I think there's some certain things about COVID I might have keep them, but then we actually went to it more casually. So
you just mentioned something. Leverage.
yeah.
Right? He just mentioned something. The dry cleaner coming to his house. How can we set up things in our lives such that we get more time back? Because if we get more time back and go talk to another customer,
For sure.
go look at another house,
Well,
worth more than us.
yeah, the
going to
dry cleaner. I mean, I think the mowing your lawn. I mean, especially for us, because when we're busy, you know, if you have a yard, and in the middle of spring is when you're ever, you know, the most busy that you're ever going to be. I mean, think about what your hourly is. I mean, 1 hour of lead generation is worth thousands of dollars. Mowing your lawn, I don't know, $50, $100. I don't know what that is, but
Lose some calories.
what's that?
Lose some calories.
Oh yeah, I mean that's okay. I mean, you know,
Totally.
but as long as it's purposeful in that perspective, that's totally fine. You know, so identify.
Dual purpose, I like that though.
I think we're good. Should we, 10 minutes after we get to start?
Yeah, I think so.
Give another couple minutes. Good.
Yeah. Maybe I see some new faces in the room.
Got a couple more people trickling in. Come on in, don't be afraid.
Is anybody here from Tenafly? Yeah, it's awesome. What's your name? Armin? Armin.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Okay, welcome, Armin. And what's your name? Esther. Esther. Nice to meet you, Esther. Manuel.
My son,
Welcome.
Maria.
Your son. He's such a showing assistant. Yeah. We had some nice comfortable seats up front, you know?
Yeah. We're trying to
So they are,
the cushy
they're
ones up
more-
front. So
The
people
cushy
sit
ones
there.
are up front. I mean, I'm assuming everybody is here because this is something that's in our goal, is to have that financial freedom. No secret, we're talking about real estate specifically. And one of the things I can say, being with KW for so long, Gary Keller absolutely has said the reason that we're in real estate, we get a real estate license, is so that we are the first person when somebody wants to sell a home, you should have I'll buy this house price right now. And I know some of us that's scary because you're like, well, I don't really have the money. Well, there's somebody in your world that has the money. If you could get a fantastic price on that property, that somebody would buy it at the price that you would offer for a right now price. We have some seats up here, really comfortable seats, and I don't bite. Mike nibbles, but.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
I mean, I think that's a good segue because, so I'm Jeremy Gulish. I'm out of Morristown, New Jersey. So everyone knows where that is, I hope. I've been licensed with Keller Williams since 2009. What year did you get licensed, PW?
2004.
All right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of unbelievable.
I was
So,
26.
all right. So I got licensed in 2009 for the primary reason that I wanted to invest in real estate. And so what I did is I worked in public relations back many moons ago. And it's kind of funny what the science of life kind of show you. So I went through the entire library system and read every single real estate investment book there was. Because at 25, my wife and I bought 2 little houses on 1 lot, and I became a first-time buyer and a landlord in that moment. And that was scary as hell because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was renting to people that were 50 years old, and I'm this 25-year-old wet behind the ears, and I don't know what I'm doing, right? So I read every single real estate investment book at the library. And then there was the last one of the ones that really resonated with me was this blue book. I don't know if you guys have seen it, MREI, right? And it looked very similar, almost identical to this book, MREI.
Hey.
Look quiet, but
Millionaire real estate agent, millionaire investor.
so when I got the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, I read it just because I run out of books. And that to me was like such a mind shift, right? Because when I thought about being a real estate agent, I thought of the idea of like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to go to a Mary Beth, and Mary Beth's gonna say, this is what you're doing this week, and you're gonna do an open house, and then Jeremy, you know, what you're gonna do is you're gonna make these phone calls, and I felt like it was just gonna be like a job, right? But that book shifted my perspective to say, well, this can be a business, right? Because that's what I grew up in. I grew up in a small business. And so this allowed me to have that perspective to say, okay, I can marry the real estate investment side to the real estate agent side. And what ultimately happened over time was you build out that ecosystem where one feeds the other, right? So I've gone full circle now, where I started out in the real estate investment space. I went into the real estate agent space to become more of an expert in real estate, but also to fund the real estate investment. And now I'm backing out of the real estate agent part, and now I'm going back into the real estate investment part, which was my intention all along. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think the really cool part, and the more that you get ingrained in the KW world or real estate agent and real estate in general, you can see how big of an ecosystem there is. So you don't have to be an agent if that's not where you want to be. I mean, if you want to be an investor, there's so many outlets on the investment side you can be. you want leadership, there's options there. So, I mean, don't think if you're not loving what you're doing on the agent side that this somehow like excludes you from being a business, right?
Thank you for saying that.
So,
Can I just, I want to grab that board so as you make some
yeah,
really good points,
yeah, please.
make a note of it.
So this slide is the reason that this is the reason I got into this. This is the reason that I'm here. This is kind of my everything now, right? So my question for you guys is, who really wants to be here right now? And it's okay if you say no, like I'm not offended. Like I really want to be here right now, and that's fine. My question is, do you have a choice on being here right now? Like, I mean, do you feel like you have a choice on what you do with your time?
Yes.
Some of us do, some of us don't, right?
Well, ultimately. you do.
Because what is time, I mean, what is time married to most in our lives typically? Money, right? Until we're able to kind of engineer our lives, we really don't have a choice on what we do with our time because that's married directly to money, right? So what if you could do whatever you wanted tomorrow or the next week or the week after that or the next year, and you got to look at your life through that lens? Some of us might find that like a little bit concerning, a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Because we spend so much time just doing our job. But, you know, are there areas in our lives that we're not focused on because we're forced to be focused on that money piece? Like, is there, maybe it's too much to think about just being able to do whatever we want with our time, but what if you could get back 10 hours of your week, right? Is there possible that you spend more time with a child, that you would make more purposeful time with your wife? Maybe you got an ailing, you know, an aging parent that you know probably are limited. You're probably counting on your, you know, 2 hands how many Thanksgivings you're gonna have with them, right? All I'm asking of you is to have an open mind on, we can start shifting from time being dictated on us being forced to chase the money to us shifting it so the money's coming towards us so we get to choose whatever we want to do. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you guys would want to do if you had just 10 hours back? Travel. Where are you going? Hawaii. Great. Who else? Who else? Open a market center in Europe. You'd have to go spend some time in Europe.
One in Trinidad too.
And in Trinidad, yeah. You'd have to be able to leave your business here and go spend some time, right? What's one more thing? What'd you do?
Spend time with the kids.
Spend time with the kids, 10 hours a week. Imagine the relationship you build, 10 hours compound every single week, 52 weeks.
That might be a little too.
Let's cut that to 5. Thank you, though. Thank you for being open.
We don't want to send his purpose in the wrong direction, right?
His wife's coming in a little while. We'll talk to her.
Yeah. So my background is I grew up in a small business. So what was interesting about that is my dad, he was a Vietnam vet, didn't go to college, he went to like art school, and he came back and he had like 2 choices. He could either go become a factory worker or start a small business. And that was kind of the choices he had. He worked in landscaping, and my mom was a special ed teacher, and they determined, hey, we're gonna go all in. We're gonna kind of leverage ourselves and try to make this thing work. And for many years, like to put it in perspective on like how they were when they started out, they bought a house, they put their like nickels together for that, but they couldn't afford both a dog and a refrigerator. So which did they buy?
The dog.
A St. Bernard. Because that was the logical choice, right? And so, right, exactly, you figured it out, right? So I grew up in an environment where I saw my dad working hours after hours. Like, so, I mean, how many of us are working almost every day throughout the spring market? Right? Sure. And that was him, right? Because if you're thinking about plants, he ended up having a garden center, but you can't like leave plants in the spring, they die for one. So, and then 2, you just have people coming constantly, and you start, you know, managing people, and there's this whole thing that you're really tied to. And over time, that business developed more, and he got more successful, but it also taught me the sacrifice that you have to make. Like getting to that place of passivity comes with a big sacrifice. And I saw that. Like, I mean, I saw growing up in that 3-6 months without him taking a day off to make things better for our family. So what was interesting though is, so we say like all this data, you have 47% of millionaires are business owners. And that's pretty cool, right? And when I looked at it, I thought that was kind of neat because I said, hey, I want to go down the business owner path because I'm certain my dad wouldn't have been well off financially if he was a factory worker, right? Like that kind of makes sense. You're going to hit this threshold, your opportunities in there. Who agrees that we're all business owners here? Do we look at ourselves as business owners? Because I also find that it's really hard until you're at a production level of maybe doing, you know, at least capping. And in MRA, we talk about 30 units until we start shifting into the leverage space. Like that's when you're taking that shift. And it's almost like you're re-identifying yourself as in this business, right? Because being an agent to a business owner is a big shift, right?
And I think you're kind of referencing like Kiyosaki's, right? Do you have a job?
Right.
Do you have a job? Are you employed? Are you self-employed? Are you a business owner? Are you an investor? And when you first get your license, you really are in that, I have a job, like I have to show up at work every day, otherwise it does not happen. As you build a business that becomes like referral based and your database is working for you, now maybe you're self-employed or you're starting to have a business. But guess what? If you were to remove yourself and go to Hawaii for 2 months, would the business still be there? If not, then you have a job. And I think a lot of us, to your point, if you're not at a point where you can leverage yourself, leverage meaning that you're getting an assistant to do some of the things so that you can just show up where you need to, where you make the most money for your company. If you're not at that level, which I would say leading with revenue puts us at like $75,000 to $100,000 a year. If you're not there, you really do have a job, and everybody has the opportunity to get there this year in this market with the inflation that we're experiencing. Commissions are the best right now. So you guys need to be hustling to get to that point where you actually own your business.
And initially, to that point, you're going to be pouring into that job, right? To invest in a business, because we need to perform from this commission income to then figure out ways that we can start funneling this to a passive perspective. So everyone's familiar. Has anyone heard of this company called McDonald's?
Never heard of them.
Never? So, well, yeah. Why is McDonald's so successful?
They
They
do.
do have very
Systems.
systems is part of it. What I recognize is, so my parents owned the business, right? But my dad was very much active in the business. So he didn't have someone that could run the organization without him. Like he wasn't able to take time off during the spring. And so they went down a path where the business started coming together and doing well. I could tell he was getting crankier over time because he was pretty much fueled by Marlboro cigarettes and black coffee, which is just not a good diet. And they got plans approved to actually develop the piece of property that they're on. So they bought this property. This was on a highway called Route 22. There used to be like no one even going on. It was parallel to 78. And over time, you know, this turned into a big highway, got developed more, and this piece of real estate got more valuable. And he looked at these big plans and was going to, you know, put in a strip mall and all these other things. And he said, "Holy cow! Like, if I put the strip mall in, what's going to happen? What's his day going to be looking like? It's going to be even busier, right?" So after they built all this business up, he had a kind of a realization that the only way he could get out of this business is by selling the property. It wasn't by selling the business. So they ended up selling the business at the height of the market back in 2006, a piece of land for like $1 million to a car dealer. A car dealer bought it because he said it was actually the worst investment he ever made because the market crashed after that and he couldn't develop it like he wanted to. But that was the only way out my parents had to get out of the business. So I ask you again, why is McDonald's so successful? Like they're different than every other franchise in this one way.
They're scalable.
No,
They own the property.
they own all the property. So except for very few locations, like if you're at the, you know, Newark Airport or something, they own the land that they're on. So if McDonald's tomorrow, we all find out we're allergic to their fries and it's going to kill us, they're still a billion dollar company. It doesn't matter. They're leveraged because they own the land too. right? So they were protected that way. So
Buy dirt.
what's that?
Buy dirt.
Yeah, as Gary Keller says, buy dirt. And so what reminded me, like I was never super smart, but I read enough of these real estate books to realize some kind of macro trends across the board. So my parents had that property, and the only reason they were able to retire is they sold that. And we're reminded of statistics like this, and this is from the Federal Reserve, and it's showing the difference of net worth of homeowners versus renters. Has everyone seen this before?
Not as simple as this.
It's really like super basic, and they release this data every 3 years. I think when 2022 data comes out, this is going to be really mind-blowing because it's going to shift. I'm certain this will be up to 300, and I'm certain this is not going to be much different than 6,000 or 7,000.
Can you explain what that says?
So what this says right here is the average net worth, if you're a renter across the country, is around $6,000 or $7,000. Like what you're worth today, if you cash out of everything, you create no more debt, and based upon what your assets are, right? But what if you own a house? I mean, I don't even know what the multiple of this is. It's like astronomical, right? So if you own a house, we know that your net worth is going to grow. I mean, this is essentially what this slide's telling us, right? So what if you own multiple houses? Does this slide make sense? Does anyone have questions about this?
It's okay if we have questions on that.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Anyone unsure about it?
And so when people say, oh, I'll just rent to get my mother. Oh, maybe I'll just rent something. I have all the money in the bank from the sale. No, you're not renting because every dollar you give away, your net worth goes down. You have nothing left in the bank and you're just giving your money to somebody else. But if you buy a piece of property, even if the mortgage and the property stays the same price, your only cost was out of pocket was that, and you're still giving it to somebody. And at the end of the day, you have an asset that's still worth what you paid for it. So your net worth is something that define your net worth. This might be an activity that all of you need to do walking out of this is, what am I worth? If I were to die today and all my assets and debts were reconciled, what's left?
Life insurance policy.
Well, hopefully we all have one.
Well, that's
My sister's like, I take you down the stairs, you're worth a lot more. But yeah.
So to build off of that, this is people's net worth. The blue. The red is their net worth if you take their house away. And that's by age. So it's from 35 up to 75. So what does that tell you? What I think is interesting about real estate is it's in some ways foolproof, right? Because if you're a renter, besides a very small percentage, or if you're a homeowner, what's the first thing you're thinking about every month that you have to pay? Your mortgage or your rent, right? Like that's like, that's the first stop. I mean, withstanding taxes, that's your next place that you got to look at, right? So it's automated. Like if I gave everyone here a raise and I started to pay each one of you $50,000 more, that's just going to show up in your bank account every month. I'd make that bet back that $50,000 is not going to be in your bank account at the end of the year. We'd all figure out a way to spend it. That's just human nature. We buy a nicer
Can we
car.
try?
What?
Can we try?
Can we try?
Seth wants to try. He wants to
See me after class. But
must be a first try.
But it's normal, right? Like we move into a nicer neighborhood, we buy a nicer car, we go to nicer restaurants, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's naturally what we do. But if we force savings through a house, what's going to happen? Over time, it's just going to start taking care of itself. But then I ask myself, well, what if you had multiple houses? How is that any different, right? Does that make sense? Because if I go back to this and I say that we'll have $200,000 in net worth by the time I'm 65 if I have just a house I'm living in, well, we can just extrapolate that, right? Like this is not like complicated math. This is pretty straightforward. So then you can kind of go back through it and say, all right, well, how many houses do I really need? Because with my folks, I saw the only reason they could retire was real estate. My dad spent 30 years telling people, or 40 years telling them that he was a landscaper and a garden center owner, but really none of that mattered. What did matter was he should have been saying he was a real estate investor. he didn't think of it that way, but if he thought more about the real estate investing part than buying, arborvitae and boxwood, that's where the power came. Am I right?
Absolutely.
What business are we in? Are we in the landscaping business or the real estate business? My point is, we're exposed to it. He wasn't exposed to the real estate side. This is what we eat, drink, and sleep every night. Some of us sleep better at night than others, right? So this is what we have that opportunity better than anyone, right? McDonald's figured it out, but they're in the fries business, right? They're really in the real estate business. What business are we in? This makes sense?
I have a question. Are you going to talk a bit about your forced savings strategies? I heard that, and I know that, and I do that, and
Yep.
I know so many people that multimillionaires now, but lived on their $40,000 salary for many years, even when they were making $400,000 and $500,000,
For sure.
just to force the savings such that 10 years later, their life looks a lot different.
Yeah, and we'll get into it more, but my wife shakes her head. So I made a proclamation 2 days ago. This is 100% true. I have the worst kitchen of all of my properties. And I've had this kitchen for
The one you live in.
the one I live in for over 3 years. And I made a proclamation, I will not buy another house until I renovate our kitchen. So another reason I mentioned this is because I've always been, I drive.
Because the down payment on the next house is going to be what's going to cost you.
Right. So like so I've always kept my bank account low every time I've gotten to $50,000, $100,000 in the real estate business. So I get to August, I'm cashing in on everything that's closing. That's wiped out because I go buy a property. And the thing is, the hedonic adaptation doesn't happen. So like, has anyone heard that term before, hedonic adaptation? So it's essentially, we keep on chasing that next summit, right? So we can do this. We could, I could take my Neon and then change it into a Kia, and I change that Kia into a Nissan, and then I go to what's next, a Lexus, and from the Lexus I could go to a Maybach, right? Like you can just keep doing that, but that's only changing our image. What I kept on doing was like continue to live at the same level, but keep on upping my net worth and that forced savings, right? So every time I had a house, I had another forced savings, vehicle. Does that make sense? So, and we were never going to buy the next Mercedes cash. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that, but the bigger focus is once this vehicle, this snowball gets big enough, you can buy that Mercedes cash every year, right? Does that make sense? Does that?
But it's the discipline and the willpower to get to that point, because
it's incremental.
we start making the money and all of us go and spend more. We
Right.
all do it. We all go out to dinner because we're like, oh, the closing happened, so we can spend $700 on a dinner for 4.
Well, I think that so much goes back to it. I'm sure Mary Beth, and I know she does a business planning class that's like second to none.
We haven't experienced it yet.
Right. Well, we'll get there. But what I think about now is what you really need to do is not live in the now, but live in the what's going to come, right? So I do most of my planning now is almost like life planning versus even like just the business planning piece. But if that's your goal, is to say, I want to buy, and this is one of my biggest business goals, is to buy an investment property this year. Well, then that money isn't then going to allocate versus the pretty Mercedes that you drive by on the way here, right? Because there's a ton of people, and our industry is really can be challenging because there's a lot of people that walk around and kind of flaunt, this kind of superficial wealth, but it doesn't mean that they're actually wealthy. Like if you read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, a Millionaire Next Door book, it talks about how many people that are way wealthier than us live very modest lives. You would have no idea. They're not going out to buy a Rolex or anything like that. That's not really what their focus is. To me, I'd much rather have the choice on what I do with my time and be able to spend that with family or travel or what have you than have the next fancy thing. But that's totally up to you.
And I just want to say that it took for me, like in all the years I've been doing this and in the environment till COVID, where Ben Kinney, and if any of you don't follow or know who Ben Kinney is, you just should. He's a smart guy in Washington. But he challenged us with the Win, Make, Give series.
Yep.
And in that series, he challenged us we had like 3 or 4 weeks where there was 9 exercises we had to complete. And we're home, we're in COVID, right? So we just do it. The first one was to do a net worth exercise. Then it was to create your home budget. Then it was to start looking at compound interest, the savings plan. What could your money do if you had $100 a month and you started with 10,000 in the account? 30 years later, what does it look like? And I started playing with that. Then it was, okay, one house, but to your point is, well, what does 10 houses look like if these people are all paying for it? We're not making any cash flow, but guess what? 30 years later, I have 10 houses that are all worth 500,000. Boom, you have $5 million in asset that somebody else paid for it. And I tell you this because it wasn't until COVID slowing me down, because you know I'm pretty fast, right? To go, babe, we gotta look at this, and we gotta get the accounts right, and we gotta get, and we refied, we paid off, we put, and I finally now understand the value of, no, we're not going on, even though I'm going to Aruba Saturday, the next super vacation that might be 25,000, because that, to me, I'm like, no, we can buy a house with that. Right. So it took me a lot of years to make this mind shift. So wherever you are in your journey, give yourself some grace and mercy, and then get attached to this lifestyle, and let's start all working towards it. And let's maybe even have an investor group after this that we meet monthly and we're talking like this.
And we're just launching that in Morristown.
If we don't
now.
talk like this, then we won't do it. And every Friday lunch hour, I'm committing to going to look at multifamily.
Yep, we just launched that in Morristown now for that reason, because so many people are coming to the investment classes. And what I would say on that is just that, you know, I don't want to go totally off script here, but you know, beginning to think about what our net worth is. The next item I would really think about is, what is my annual budget? What does it cost me? You know, and MAPS coaching does this, but what does it really cost me to live, right? Because if you have that number, then it gets pretty exciting, because then you're thinking about, how far am I to hitting that number, which is my financial independence number, my FI number? Because then you get to do whatever the heck you want. So yeah, maybe you want to be a team leader, maybe you want to be an agent, maybe you want to be a property manager too, but that's your choice then. That's not a forced thing that you have to do. Does that all make sense? So I've always thought, I'd much rather someone give me $10,000 a year in perpetuity than someone give me a check for $100,000. Because if I get enough of those opportunities that are $10,000 a year, once I hit that financial independence number, it's game over. Like, I get to do whatever the heck I want, right? Does that all make sense? So I think that's the other investment piece that you really kind of want to think about. Is there any questions with this slide?
And Gene Rivers does a really great exercise where it's the what is it, is it LIE? Is it LIE? Lifestyle, investment, and debt. It's LID. It's the LID exercise. So it's like, this is how you first start with this. What does your lifestyle cost you? Like, what is the lifestyle you're living that you want to live cost you? Okay, what's the house cost you? What's your cars cost you? What's your insurance? Okay, is it $10,000 a month? Are you looking to live a $20,000 a month lifestyle? Start with that. Boom, you need 240,000. You need 120,000, whatever. Investment. How many investments will you purchase every year? Okay, well, if the investment is a $500,000 multifamily, I need 100,000. I'll need 200,000 to do 2 a year. Okay, there's your I. And then the D is the debt, and it's basically going to add those two up and take 50% because you're going to have to pay taxes and whatever other debt you might have. And then that becomes the real economic engine number of what you need to make financially annually, such that you can make the machine run. Once you get all your properties, then you don't need to have the investment number. And you probably don't even, everything else could be cash flow person.
Exactly. So, I mean, the biggest shift is to start thinking about ways that you can make money while you sleep. Because I think the real estate agent side is probably the most active, really one of the most active jobs you could possibly have. So, I mean, what other career do we tell people we're available 24/7? Why we do this to ourselves? Like, it's like mind-boggling to me. But it's really hard to like enjoy your weekend and like go to your kid's little league game because like there's, you know, you're constantly getting texts about showings or what have you. And it's really hard to pull yourself away from that. Would we all agree with that?
Pull yourself leverage.
Right. And that's when it comes to changing this position up. So, you know, what we do now is very much active from a real estate agent standpoint, but this active role, this, you know, income accumulation, the wealth accumulation can be positioned so that we can also move it to a passive side. The goal, in my opinion, is to get enough on the passive side that we get to do and choose what we want to do. Does that all make sense?
Mhm.
So, you know, a lot of us in this room really look at the market and say, oh my God, the market's up so much. Like, you know, how can I possibly invest right now? Well, I can tell you, I went to trainings 4 or 5 years ago, and I said the exact same thing. I went to them and said, you know, I don't know if I want to buy another investment property because the market's so far up. Like, and that's 4 to 5 years ago. What's going to happen next? I have no idea, is what it comes down to. I mean, personally, they keep talking about, can we get into a real estate bubble? Sure, but the fundamentals that we have so few housing units, I don't know that that's really going to be what's going to happen. So, I mean, we can keep always telling ourselves, I'm going to buy a property some point, but we may always maintain that aim phase without actually ever pulling the trigger and doing something. And that's a really dangerous spot for investors. I can't tell you how many, I stopped working with investors on the agent side until I found someone who was absolutely committed, because I have so many people that say, okay, and I deliver them the property they want, and they just wouldn't actually pull the trigger to fire on it. Because it's so easy to say, oh, I'm not, this is what I don't want to do. Like, you need to live in a house, you're going to buy a house for yourself. But buying an investment, you know, that can be a scary proposition. And getting over that hump can be kind of hard. So we're going to talk about how we can do that. So I want you to think about what your bigger goal is. So if we don't have a goal, we're just going to kind of spend money kind of arbitrarily. But what is our biggest goal to have out of this passive real estate lifestyle, right? And it doesn't have to be strictly on the money side. Like, there's an agent I mentor with who's going to be an empty nester starting next year. And she's worried about losing her kids to just them becoming adults. So she figured out a way to marry the idea of, they're into skiing. So she bought a house over by Akimo in Vermont. And it's an Airbnb, but now it's been an experience for her family to go to. And her son's going to go to the University of Vermont. And it's an awesome Airbnb investment. So for her, it was married to not just the investment side, but also an opportunity for her to spend time with her kids. Does that make sense? Another woman in her office, kids are going to college, but how much is like student housing? It's astronomical, right? So I don't know if anyone has kids in college, but I mean, you're talking about how much a year for student housing? 20,000. Sure.
My kids, like for example, I have a son that graduated from Arizona, and I kick myself now because not only was I paying myself rent for him to house off campus,
Yep.
but I actually went to Arizona shopping for a place because I was kind of thinking along those lines.
Sure.
I was scared to pull that trigger.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, well, okay, he graduates in a few years, then what am I going to do?
Right.
I didn't think about, well, I print it out, or I can,
Sure.
sell it and make a profit.
Right.
So now that he graduated, and I add up all the money, because that's what I did with COVID. I started breaking down all my expenses, where I'm like, I literally could have at least halfway paid through just a condo.
Right.
When at the end of the day, I could have had him in a condo and had kids and his roommates,
Right.
and him renting and paying for the mortgage itself. And I right now would have doubled my money at this point.
For sure.
4 years ago.
Right.
And now here we are.
And then not be out the 80 grand, right?
Exactly.
From that. So, I mean, think about lifestyle wise, everyone's gonna be in a different position. I have another guy who I mentor, he's 28, and he bought a house in Union. I love this because he's like the most millennial ever. He bought a house before he bought a car, like, which I just like loved. He was like, oh, you're around the garage. I was like, what about your car? He's like, oh, I don't have a car. And I was like, he ended up house hacking it. He lives in it, and he's got 2 roommates. He lives there he gets paid a few $100 a month for people to live in the house with him. He doesn't care. He's like, I just need a little room and I'm happy. And he's like crushing it at 28, and he commutes into the city. Like, am I going to do that? Hell no. But I mean, think about ways that we can make this, leverage it for ourselves, right? What is that investment going to look like for you? Like, maybe every year you go down to Fort Lauderdale, but you've been going there for the last 10 years and renting a house for $3,000 a week. Okay, maybe it's time that you start paying yourself rent for that week that you go to, right? Just start thinking about what could change in your life if you bought an investment property. There's a sheet that everyone has in front of them. That's what we're going to try to fill out by the end of this, right? If you're really serious about this, and hopefully get over the aiming action and actually put a plan in place so that we do that this year and next year.
Yeah.
So without looking up here, can you guys yell out some ways that you can invest in real estate? Different types of ways? And you guys all look at the board behind me, which has them all, but I mean, give me one way that you invest in real estate.
Two families and it's
Yeah, if I buy two family,
an
easy two family, you know, and with a two family, you can, if you're starting out, you can live in one side and rent out the other, and then move on there if you want to have a family. So you don't, yeah, that's essentially what my wife and I did. How about what else? What other things we did?
Organize or get into a syndicate.
Syndicate? Can you explain to me what a syndicate is? Just the top level?
Basically, using other people's money to invest in property.
Okay. Yep. So a lot of times, there's a guy, Kyle. Have you had Kyle Kovacs in at all?
We do. We haven't had him in yet, but we have him here.
Yeah.
We've had him here prior to me, yeah.
Super smart guy. And he just did a syndicate down. He's done a number of them. They're supposed to be invested in that one. It's something they filled up so fast that it didn't work out. But a syndicate is essentially a group of investors are coming in and buying a big property. So in his case, he's buying Class A, essentially townhouse condos in Texas that they're renting out, right? And you have a lot of money coming into these. So they might be buying something for $30, $40 million. And you're all putting that money in together. And there's some big advantages from a tax perspective for real estate agents. What are some other ones?
multifamily units.
Multifamily,
Airbnbs.
Opportunity zones.
opportunity zones. That's kind of a vehicle, but I wouldn't say necessarily a way, because you could buy it, multifamily, or what's the one that all the investors are doing in every television show is focused on? Fix and flip. What's the one thing that every flipper I've ever talked to asked them what's their biggest piece of advice for someone? What do you think they say is the one thing they wish they did 10 years ago? Held on to the properties. So keep that in mind with flippers. You may also want to have a conversation with them. And I'm always trying to be transparent with my clients. And a lot of times, my mantra with all my clients in the business has always been hold on to real estate, don't sell real estate. And all of them tell me that's really bad advice for my business. And I go, it doesn't matter, no one listens to me. And now they listen to me a little more because, if you said 4 years ago you held on to your property, you do pretty well. A lot of flippers, I think you can have that conversation with them. If build them a large enough wealth that it's going to pay you off in the long run.
So another book on that is Infinite Game. You are playing the infinite game here. So in the
pain points, you'll go and sell that property. But if you're paying infinite game, there might be some squeezes, but long-term goal is that asset's paid off and you're just cashing in on it. And also there is another book that was written after the MREA and MREI and the fix and flip, which is called The Hold. And it's the yellow book. You might see it's in my office. And that is how to buy and hold property. And that was Linda McKissick and Jimmy McKissick's story.
We all need to move at some point. So when you move and you sell and buy, 10 years later, you look back and you say, I wish I had kept it property.
Yeah.
For sure.
That I sold. For sure.
Yeah, the extension was become popular. And this is actually, there's a book called Burr, written by, it's actually a Keller Williams guy out in California. I forget his name. So that's the extension of the idea of the flip is instead of you go through, you buy the property. So the flip, we buy it, we renovate it, and we sell it, right? The Burr model is you buy it, renovate it, refinance it, and then we rent it out.
And then repeat.
You
And then
rehab,
repeat.
repeat.
Right? I'm going to talk about the last property I did. I went into it. I left the property. I didn't actually do it because I wanted to have the cash flow from it. But I could do the Burr model, and I would have gotten money and had no money into the deal and $4,000 a month. It's really cool the way that you can kind of do this if you focus in the right way. I think we kind of talked about all these. The house hacking, that kind of plays into, like you were talking about the college housing. Ultimately you buy a property for your son or daughter, they get the roommates in there. You're kind of like this joint kind of house hack investment property. So does any of these jump out to anyone? Anyone like to think about doing one of these for themselves? Or
maybe multifamily.
multifamily, the Burr model?
And in town, my city is exploding right now. The one I live in, Perth Airport.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So finding those cities like Patterson, putting some sections of cliffs in, and areas that maybe somebody wouldn't want to buy right now, buy, hold, it will go up in value. It's New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, if this was staying my first property, all the multifamilies I brought were all buying them because I can build equity into them. So like on the commercial side, they're always trying to buy properties that they can build the equity and increase the asset. Similarly, if we go in and buy a really beat up 2-family, you can go in there, you know, buy it for a reasonable price, renovate the whole thing, and then you do a cash out refinance on it. You built up the equity by fixing it. Your rents are going up. Like we as agents should be able to go into a property and say, oh, this place is, you know, beat the heck, and they're only renting it for $1,600. If someone goes in here and actually does this right, this property could be rented for $2,200. Like those are the things that we should know, right? Like because
and with inflation going up and jobs not going up as much, you're gonna have more and more people that just can't qualify to own and they're just gonna rent.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that inflation piece too, because I think that's really a hot topic right now. So then it comes to finding opportunities, right? Would everyone agree it's really hard to find properties right now for listings, right? So, but like to be successful, like how many houses, I mean, and everyone's gonna have something different. Like how many houses do you need to sell this year? Is that, I mean, how many listings do you need to sell? Is that 5 this year? If you guys build out your business plan, is that 50 this year? Is that 20? What is it? 20, right?
I mean, but on average, an agent's going to sell 5 to 10 listings a year. That's in comparison to how many listings are coming on the market.
Right.
They're out there.
Right. But what if I said, and I think we're all going to go, oh, it's so hard to find listings right now, right? But what if you made it your goal just to find one investment a year? Just one. Because if you have the right investment, you could pretty much pay for your entire year on that one property if you find a really good property. Maybe you can't get there with one property, maybe it's 2. But if we can find 12 listings, we can find one property that's worth buying. You know, so I know it's a tight inventory market, but there's still opportunities out there. So MLS, you know, there's still properties on the MLS. The last property I worked on was an MLS listing last year. I'm in Morris County. It's just like everywhere else. That's crazy. My favorite part about being an investor is people go back to me and they throw it in my face and go, you're a real estate agent. You find you get all the good deals. The house I live in, I showed it to 3 other people before I bought it. So, you know, to put it in perspective, and I have people come through and go, oh, you made a killing on this house. Who was it, like an off market or something? I was like, no, I tried to convince 3 people to buy it. The only one I could convince is my wife. Like, so like, this isn't rocket science, guys. Like, but I was able to see the potential in it. That's why I kept pushing this out. I'm like, someone's got to buy this damn thing. But, you know, not everyone wants purple carpet. Not everyone wants a mold in their basement. I mean, I get that. But we as agents should be able to go through a house and say, this is what it's going to cost to fix this. I went through with my inspector and I said, hey, can we just run through? It's a short sale. They're not going to do anything for me. Here's my list of things I'm concerned about. Can you pop in and see if there's anything else? Like, right? Like, this is what we do for a living. Like, who do the investors call when they want to get a CMA? Call us. Why the hell are they buying? They don't even know how to do a CMA, right? So.
And it does not have to be in New Jersey. I know some people have maybe smaller budgets. Maybe Pennsylvania is the place to start.
For sure. There's a ton of, I mean, upstate New York, various places we go. Word of mouth. I mean, the fact that once you start saying that, I have a guy that I worked with a bunch, he was a flipper, and now I convinced him that he should hold on to the property. But now people literally come to him because he has an Instagram where he's always showing his properties that he's renovating. Now that he's doing that, you know, people are reaching out to him and saying, hey, you know, I got a family member that passed away. You want to take a look at it? It's beat the heck, because it might be something you want to do. So word of mouth stuff definitely still works. There's for sale by owners. I know there's not as many, but we're actually seeing more now because people think that they can just sell properties without having us involved. And a lot of them sometimes don't know how to do a CMA or putting their house on for less than it should be. Right?
So can I say something to that?
Yes,
Yesterday we had in Bold,
And they were talking about Keller Offers, which they don't even have here yet. Okay, Keller Offers is basically wholesale offer to the property. So every time you go on a listing appointment, and somebody's gonna say, oh yeah, right, like a for sale by owner is gonna take like a 70% offer. Well, you don't know. Why are they going for sale by owner? Maybe they don't have the money to put the roof on and fix the gutters so you go in there saying that I have an offer for you. Well, maybe it's 70% of market value, but it's an offer in writing that we will close on it.
Now to the trigger, like I'm nervous about where would I get the funding? There's plenty of people in this room alone that would go ahead and, you know, partner in on a deal with you, or you get hard money.
Yep.
But I just want you to keep that in mind. You have for sale by owners out there to make them an offer in writing, like the Keller offer is a strategy.
Like this whole class is more than anything is a mindset class, right? So we start thinking of ourselves as business owners, we start thinking of ourselves as investors, and just not always thinking about real estate agent. Like we can be that too. We can be a real estate agent and investor and business owner. We can wear all those hats, right?
And that conversation just looks like this is one way we can do business. If this doesn't work for you, Mr. Seller, we could also put you on the regular market. And then you have to go through people coming through the house, the inspections, the appraisal, and all that stuff. But you can give people options.
Yeah, and what I can't, emphasize enough, and we're gonna get this because I'm gonna go to autobiographically the properties I bought along the way. Like, your first investment property is not probably gonna be, a redevelopment for 20 units in Jersey City. It's gonna probably be something pretty basic. Like the house we bought was a turnkey 2-family. Every step along the way, it got a little bit more complicated. So then I did the kind of the wholesale strategy, buying a property that I was gonna list. The last one I did was had to have it rezoned. So, the biggest thing is just starting. Once we start, we're gonna get more adept at what we're doing. Like if we think about our first listing presentation that we ever did, it was a train wreck. Like it's laughable that someone like literally signed the document the first time I did it. But now I'm pretty damn good at it, right? So, be kind to yourselves as we go through this. Exactly what Mary Beth said, listing opportunities. We're gonna talk about an example there. And the last thing is wholesale properties. Is everyone familiar with the term wholesale property? Because I know, so you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, well, wholesale is basically I get it under contract and I'm selling the contract to somebody else.
Exactly. So is everyone clear on that? So someone comes in, let me just pause here just so everyone knows, because someone reached out to me and asked me to turn in my office this week. So, I go, Mary Beth wants us to sell her property. I know market value of that house is worth $400,000. I come in and she agrees to sell it to me for $350,000. Okay. I don't want to buy this house, but I flip it to someone else. You decide that you're going to buy it for me for $370,000. I get a $20,000 finder's fee. You get a house that's under market. Mary Beth gets her money. Does everyone understand how that works? What a wholesale property is? Talk to Mary Beth. Talk to your broker about like getting involved with it. Because there's some can be kind of dicey and from an ethical standpoint. So please.
I've been doing that for like 3 years.
The wholesale? Yeah. So and so maybe reach out to your neighbor. Yeah. So he might have some expertise on too. So your question?
So my
So
question
you're
was,
getting the wholesale properties and
Yeah, I'm doing a lot.
you're
Yeah.
So
I'm actually closing the one right now. After
are you owning them?
No, I just virtually do it.
Okay.
I just buy a lead list and I just call them on cold call stuff and have a cash buy. Yeah, so I've been doing that for like 3 years.
You've gotten our attention.
Yeah.
Properties a year, that's right. Been wholesaling like 2 properties a month, 3, each $20,000 fee.
So do you have any fear when you're calling these people?
There's no risk for me. Not like liable.
What does that conversation sound like?
It's just I call them like, hey, I see your properties for sale. I used to do on Zillow, and that's why I messed up. And I learned, so I just bought a lead list, like foreclosures, absentee orders, vacancy, and all this stuff. And I would just call them up. Sometimes I can't pay the tax, the water, like electricity shut off. So I'll just call them, talk to them about the property, I'll want comps, find an investor, and then just close. Like I have title companies all over the US. So I just send them there, and I sign the contract. And I close.
Who told you could do that?
I mean, I saw it on YouTube.
Yes, you just did it. I was saying, you just did it. Oh, people are like, wait.
It was
When I do
hard though,
that,
because I was going up Zillow, and like that was like the worst mistake ever, because they think like they know what their house is worth. Some people put like their house is worth like 300, they post it like 350, and I can't go down with it because they're like firm on that price. But I would just buy the list and like look for like specific things, people that like are motivated or stuff, and they would sell their house at like low offer, and I would just put my ARVs, comps.
I have an idea for you.
So I've been doing it for a long time.
My girls are serving.
I just gonna say,
Great job.
you have to do like 2 closings, so how do you reassign the contract?
There's a double closing, but that's more difficult, and I don't need to do that. I just do one contract. That's it. I just sent them the purchase agreement. They signed it, they sent it back to me. So if I get the house for like 100,000 and the ARV is 300, I will get the house for 100 and sell it to an investor for like 150.
But your contract has to be reassigned.
Exactly.
To the end buyer.
Yeah, so I sent that, I sent the purchase agreement to the title company, they hold it, I tell them, don't do anything yet, don't start title work until I get an investor. So then I get an investor, I sign the contract with him for a $50,000 fee. So he's buying it for 150, so I get the difference. So I make the 50,000. And I mostly do 2 weeks close.
Okay.
Some do 30s, but I just try to do fast, so I can get 4 properties in a month.
And people were afraid that you wouldn't have an investor. I guarantee you, if you just put that out there, hey, I got properties, who wants them? You'll find the buyer.
Yeah, someone on the screen tomorrow. Yeah. And you had a question?
No, my question was that you need two closing, so you can reassign.
But I know
Some attorneys will say,
there's two states that are making it like legal now. Like, I think it's Oklahoma and Philadelphia. I mean Pennsylvania. Those are like they're getting down on it, but everything else you could.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
It sounds like people are
Somebody was inspired here.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to get into, I'm going to share like my experience because I've touched upon a lot of the things that we talked about in the last slide. And just, I want you to think about just the different ways to go about this, right? Like in your own life. I mean, and I just want your creative juices thinking, you know, who do you know in your world that can, you know, try to expose you to? We just learned of someone who's doing wholesaling here. So maybe we should be talking to him, but maybe there's someone else in your life that you know that's a property manager, you know, or what have you. So start thinking about just what all this looks like. Let me just, I'm showing you an embarrassing video from exactly 10 years ago. Let's see if this gets, hopefully it doesn't an ad. All right.
Hi, I'm Jeremy, and I moved into 2-unit multifamily to this 4-bedroom single family, and this is how I did. My wife is doing it, and I'm married out this town, but so this is actually really useful. And what's really unique about this property is it's 2 houses on one lot. The front house where we live is actually known as Workman's Cottage. And it's 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, all the living space is upstairs. And then down below is just a basement / storage. In the back is a house that we actually rented. And it's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, colonial home surrounded by a really great setting of the park and patio, which I really love. Right off the bat, I think most of us have a lot of trepidation about buying and being first-time homeowners and also first-time landlords. Because it meant the day that we bought that house, we also have to rent the back house and really become landlords for the first time and deal with that responsibility. But from a financial standpoint, we could have tenants share the mortgage payments with us and allow us to buy more home than we would have been able to on our own. Actually, time came when we wanted to start a family, and we needed a place that was a little bit more space. And that's when we found our future home. It was a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house that was just a half-mile away from our own house. The house is pretty bland, so we did some upgrades, but overall, we saw a lot of potential with this place. Unfortunately for us, things didn't quite go as planned. Eventually, we got to the closing. I was working on paperwork to get everything finalized, and I told my wife to go ahead to do the walkthrough, and we showed up. The house was a nightmare. There was boxes everywhere, stuff throughout the house. It was nowhere near condition to close that day. So my wife was in tears, tried to make the best of the situation, and how we worked it out is we made sure that everything was cleaned up the next day, and we held the papers and didn't sign until the next morning, but everything worked out. So the house was very functional, but it had no personality, and it was really why people were looking to buy this house. So after we settled in, we started on some improvements, starting with the kitchen. We repainted all the walls and even reworked all the plumbing. In total, we probably spent about $25,000 for doing the kitchen, the 2 bathrooms, and then some basic cosmetic stuff throughout the rest of the house. you know, while the real estate market isn't great right now, we know Geller Road is going to pay off this around this LA expensive.
Yeah, right.
And the greatest addition to a home, whether baby girl, LA, to it, you know. So did all the hard work.
No.
I see.
All right, so
exactly how much one of my 7 channels is currently earning. So as you see right over here on my computer, I started this channel just to prove to you this year, okay? I started in about 7 months.
sorry about that. All right, so to put it in perspective, that first house we bought, in theory, was a terrible investment, all right? Because the reason I say that was 25, we bought it in 2006, right? So that was like the absolute apex of the market, right? I didn't know my ass from my elbow. I had an agent. I think this is the first house we looked at. We looked at like 3 more to justify us buying this one, even though we kind of knew we were going to end up buying it. And so we moved in. It was totally turnkey. So the prior owner was the one who did the work to it, renovated it. We lived in the front, so it was 2 bedrooms in the front house, 2 bedrooms in the back house, and we rented out the back one. So we put down 20% down. In hindsight, if I was to do this over again as a first-time buyer, I would probably put down like 3%. We still were able to, pay things down, but I came from a traditional background. My parents were like, oh, you have to put down 20%. So I loaned 10% from my dad. So another lesson there that, if you don't have the money, maybe there's someone in your world that, can, help you fund it. You don't necessarily need to be putting down 20%, but in that case, I was fortunate to be able to take a loan from him. And so this is the one that we started with. All things being said, their first investment we bought at 6.875. So when all of us talk about the sky's falling because our rates are at 5%, well, this was 11 years ago and at 6.875, and that actually didn't seem like a bad rate at the time. I've refied this 3 times now, or 2 times, and now it's officially paid off. So I chose, there's different ways that you can present things, right? So you could be focused on the cash flow part. So in that perspective, paying it down, when I refied the mortgage, I went for a shorter time period, right? So I initially went to a 20-year, and then I went to a 15-year. And because this was the highest interest rate loan that I had, I recently did a cash out refi on my house to a 2% and paid off this house entirely. So, I paid it off quickly because I wanted to have the financial freedom and the cash flow. On the flip side of that, I could have leveraged this more and allow myself to buy more properties. There's just 2 different avenues to go. Does everyone understand that? Right? So nothing is right or wrong. It's really a personal taste on what you want to do. So in that time frame, I've had this house for, I bought it, my daughter's 11, but that's when we moved from this house. So I had this house, so 2006 we bought it, so it's been 15 years, but now it's fully paid off. And I'm renting it for $4,400 a month. I didn't update the slide because I just think it's easier, but currently it's paid off entirely. And other than, I've really done all the updates to the house. I just did $15,000 on an expansion and moving laundry and building an office onto it. But with that, it's totally paid off. So I look at this house, I always called it the college house because when we first bought it, went down to the 20-year, we have it set by the time my daughters went to college to pay for their college. Does that make sense? Yeah. So my point being is, this is the worst investment I had. I bought it at the absolute height, but it's paid off entirely. It's worth more than $500,000, and I'm making $4,000 a month on it. Cool, after expenses. Next one. So this is the one we moved into, but now we laddered up, right? So I hated this house. I hate buy levels, but I kept on looking at things. And keep in mind, this is all about sacrifice, right? So my wife and I remember we were down in Cape May, and this was in the same neighborhood. So we could walk from this house to our prior house. And all these were, if you're familiar with Morristown, Morristown's got a downtown area, and it's only really close to that too. So that was kind of cool. So I kept watching this house, and I was like, it's so ugly. I don't like this house. And then they did a $40,000 price reduction. And I said to my wife, I go, we have to go look at this house because they just dropped the price on it. And we both are like, we dropped our shoulders. We're like, all right, we'll go look at the house. We go to the house, and there's an older woman who was there, and it was just, you saw the photos, it was super dated. And the nice part about it is we knew it needed to work. Like the kitchen cabinets had like a door knocker opener. Like you can't live with that. Like you can't, it was freaking hideous, right? So we knew going in, it needed the kitchens, it needed the bathroom, but we knew we could put that work into it and build the equity up, right? And this was a single family house. We wanted more space to have a family, but now we're doing a little bit more. Now we're doing the renovations to the property. Does that make sense? So we are expanding it a little bit more on what we're looking at. So the great part about this, that whole neighborhood appreciated really well. A little tip for us, when we moved from this house, we went to, it won't be the next one, but then the house that we're in now, I rented the house out. And now I feel like it's almost a little greedy to like actually get paid a commission on renting your own house, right? Like, doesn't that feel like a little bit slimy? So what happened is I put it on the market to like rent, and I was like, well, pay me half the month's rent. But I was like, honestly, if it comes to me, I won't even worry about that fee. And I told the agent that, she's like, oh, our clients are relo, like this money has to go to someone, so it might as well go to you. So I ended up getting paid $2,000 to rent my own house. That's pretty cool, right? So we talk about this ecosystem. It's really kind of neat because relo is like, well, they're paying it one way or another. Might as well pay you on it. And so I've had a family that moved in, and they've been there since we moved out of it. So they've been there for, I don't know, 5 years now, relocation. So this is the next property that we bought. So this one was great timing. This was in 2011. So 2011, 13, 12, 13. It was a two family. This is a situation that probably you've had conversation with on a wholesale side. It was a husband had a portfolio of properties. He passed away. Then they went to the wife. The wife wanted really nothing to do with managing these things and had just totally neglected this property. It was interesting because we had a tenant upstairs who had been in the house for like 8 years when I bought it. And the whole place just totally needed to be redone. So the downstairs unit was vacant. We went in and renovated that whole place. And I went to him upstairs and I said, this guy Bill was really super nice. He had 3 cats and he was a smoker. And all of you go, oh my God, I can't believe you have a tenant with 3 cats and a smoker. Here's my flip side question of that. Where is a tenant going to go who has 3 cats and is a smoker? He's not going anywhere, right? So I said to him, I go, hey, Bill, I actually got along with him really, really, really well through the process. And I said, listen, like, what do you want me to do here? I can do a couple things. Like, I can renovate this whole place if you want to move downstairs, and then your rent's going to look like this. Or, we can take care of the issues that you have, and we'll address those. And I was like, one way or another, we got to bump your rent because you haven't had a rent bump in like 8 years. But this is what the rent's going to look like if we don't renovate it, and this is what it'll look like if we do renovate it. He said, well, I don't want you to touch it, right? Fine. We go in, we replace the stove, did a couple little modest changes, and I bumped around a little bit. We did the downstairs, came out beautifully, right? And so 2 years later, those tenants move out. Like my model in Morristown, I get these couples that are always playing house because it's like a mile from the green. They move in together because they're not ready to be married. They play house. They make the house great because like they're kind of in this nesting phase, right? It's their first place. And then they move on, and guess who they hire as a real estate agent to buy their house? Me, the ecosystem's at work again, right? So anyway, they moved out, bought a house with me, and I called Bill and I say, hey, Bill, they're going to be moving out from downstairs. Just want to give you a heads up, you're going to see some activity. And he said, hey, like, can I move downstairs? And I said, all right, like, I don't have an issue with it, but you can't smoke inside. And at this point, he had like 1 cat, the other 2 had like passed away. I was like, so you can't smoke inside, so he moved down. I said, I was going to rent it for this. And I said, I'll do it to you direct for $100 less. And it was great because I knew he was pretty chill. So when I renovated the upstairs, he wasn't giving me a hard time about construction. So he moved downstairs. He called me like a month later. He's like, this has been life-changing. He's like, I feel like a real person now. The place is so much nicer. It's changed my lifestyle. I'm not smoking anymore. And I'm like friendly with him. Like, we don't have to be acrimonious with our tenants. Like, being a landlord doesn't mean you're a jerk. Like, I've been to 2 of my tenants' weddings. So just to put it in perspective. So he moved downstairs, was like super cool through all the construction. He's the kind of guy that calls if there's any issues at the house and lets me know, but it's really great. So this one, value of it probably over $550 right now. This one we also paid off because if you're a non-owner occupied investment property or a commercial loan, those are going to be the highest interest rates. So my goal is always to pay down the ones with the highest rate 4 months, right? And keep in mind, my goal along the way, sure, I can leverage these more and be able to make money. I just want the financial freedom. Like I have a number in mind that I want to get to, so that's my whole goal here. So this was the house before, like really kind of run down and nasty. And then this is what it looked like after we did the renovations. So, and this is all cheap. This is Home Depot backsplash for like, I don't know, like $3 a square foot. These were similar cabinets. I think we did this kitchen for like, including appliances, like, I don't know.
Less than 10,000.
Yeah, around 10 grand. So it doesn't have to be like crazy expensive. And keep in mind, you're like, yeah, you have to put the money up front on this, but who's that money benefiting? Like I'm on a hold hand. So I'm holding this, I'm building the equity into them. And then if I want to cash out refi, this is my new piggy bank, right? So it's not that this money is being spent out to nowhere. I'm doing the renovation, my rent goes up substantially, and we go from there. And this had been running for, I think they him for like $1,400, and now I rent it for $2,200. So like, and the renovation cost wasn't crazy or anything, and the property value was up. So this is my it's my personal house, and so
I just want to put something in perspective.
Yep.
There's only 4 houses there in 10 years.
Yep.
So I just like, and now you're going to start to see it kind of snowball a bit.
Right.
And the journey is, but I want everybody to know your journey is your journey. So for today, day 1 of a 10-year thing, imagine where you can get.
And this is like, we're in New Jersey, which is great and bad, right? Like it's really expensive, but it doesn't mean that you need like 5 houses to like, I mean, I see these people like picking up houses in the Midwest, and I was like, I mean, I like my tenants, I really do. I don't want to manage 5 tenants. Like I'd much rather manage like 1 tenant on the same type of rent roll that I'm getting for these 5 properties. So it's all a different perspective, right? Like it's all, you can get better returns in other states, but you're probably going to find a manager and there's other things that eat into that. So it's all what you want to do. So this one is our house that we currently live in. It was a short sale. Again, it had a furnace that in the ducting was like pretty much putting carbon monoxide throughout the entire house. It had like mold in the basement. It had like that purple bold carpet in like my daughter's bedroom. I mean, it was like hideous, but like it was all, other than the furnace and like the stuff in the basement, like it was all cosmetic. Like I knew going in, I was like, this isn't crazy renovation stuff, but does that scare the hell out of most buyers? Sure. Like, I mean, it's a 5-bedroom house. So all these families are looking at it. The last thing they say is like, I'm never putting, a Sally in a house that had mold in it. Like, is mold the biggest thing in the world? No. We fixed the sump pump. I haven't had water. That was my biggest concern buying a house. I haven't had a drop of water in my house. So with that house, I mean, we have before and afters, but, just buying right from the get-go is just, critical. And it's a mile from the downtown of Morristown. We bought it back in 2016. That market's gone like, it's just crazy, right? Like,
Well, again, you wouldn't have seen that if you weren't in the market, the ecosystem of.
Right. And I bought it, it was a short sale. I mean, I don't know if you guys, the other thing I like about, real estate is I tell people I'm the surgeon that does the operation on himself first. So I went through the process with the short sale. I mean, it's completely like arbitrary. So the house was on, I knew the listing agent. I talked to him. I said, hey, Gordon, what was the last offer for you? He said, oh, the last offer they accepted was $690. And I go, okay, I'm gonna come at $670. And it took 4 months till the bank responded. The bank responded and said, we want $730. And I go, no, that doesn't make any sense. My wife is like, now she's committed on this house. And she's like, she wants the house. She's like, I think we should go up. I go, we're not going up. This is like completely like made up. Like there's just someone, asset manager in, in Des Moines, Iowa, who's making these decisions. I sent up this long letter that said, hey, this is all the issues that you have in the house. You got mold, you got this, you got that, the other thing. I sent it over. Their attorney responds back and said, hey, not going to happen. It's a dead deal. See you on the next one. My wife's totally pissed at me. So a week goes by, we get an email that said, all right, the bank has decided they'll accept $670. It's like, what the hell, right? Like, it makes no sense. So when I work with clients on short sales, I go, take logic and reason, throw it in the garbage can, and that's a good place to start. And don't call me every month asking for an update because, like, you're not going to have it. You might be waiting for 6 months until you find it back here or something, right? But was it a pain in the ass? 100%. Was it an emotional roller coaster? 100%. Did it make me a ton of money? 100%. Like, so there is a sacrifice. If you want to go buy the turnkey flip house, you're going to pay over market for it, and you're not going to get any equity out of it. Like, there is going to take sacrifice along the way, right? So going back to us thinking about buying dirt and thinking about opportunities to purchase properties, this house was a house I went in to go list, and I went in and I didn't know anything about it. It was close to my house. It was only like a mile away. And I gave them this CMA, and I was leaving there, and she said, how soon can we get on the market? And I said, it's gonna be like, you know, we gotta get a photographer in, we'll have it in on like Monday, this is a Friday. And she's like, I just need an offer like now. And I was like, okay. I was like, let me see what I can do, and I'll get back to you. I go home, and I say to my wife, I was like, this woman like wants this house sold like yesterday. I was like, it's a mile from her house. It was a chiropractic office. So it was really weird. It had like these 1970s like X-ray machines and stuff. It was like totally weird to put your head around, right? And that's why it has like these 2 doors in the front of it. It has like 2 different entries because it was a chiropractic office. But it was all in a residential zone. And so I said to her, I was like, they want an offer like today. I was like, I gave them an offer. I told them the CMA was like to sell like in like a week price anyway. I was like, why don't we just like see if we go in, we take 5% off, which is what it would have been, and just buy it outright. And she said, okay. So I called the woman. I said, listen, like, are you okay with this? She's like, well, you do like $5,000 more. And I go, okay, done. And we bought it. The situation was, I didn't know any of this. I do not get emotional about real estate. I don't really want to know what people's stories have been, involved with divorce sales and stuff. I just don't want to know. It turned out her brother, who she was selling the house for, had like inoperable brain tumor that was expanding, and he was literally losing his mind, and he was gonna die, and like also fighting with his ex-wife, and like they just wanted the stress to go away. Like they just did not care, right? Like I wasn't taking advantage of anyone. Like for them, the value was just to be done with this. Like, and I told them exactly what the price would be if they did the renovations and they did work to the house. They wanted nothing to do with it. So, don't think that just because, like, don't always think that money is the main driver for the reason people are selling their house, right? And that was a perfect example of it. So with this one, we came in, we did some, it was mainly cosmetic repairs. The kitchen was actually fine. We came in, did the white subway tile, which is like $1 a square foot, Lowe's appliances, some tile floor, redid it. We have someone in there now for almost $4,000 a month. And the equity's gone, through the roof just because of the location. We bought it to, right off the gate, making money off of it. This is the only property I flipped. Probably happy I did. The only reason I flipped this one was I bought this as a wholesale. If someone was in bankruptcy, some wholesaler reached out to me. He was actually having trouble selling it. He got like a $15,000 fee on it. But I went into this as the first flip property I did. Lesson I did is like I talked to a contractor. So for us that don't have the money to buy these properties outright, I talked to a contractor, and I just didn't want to be overly leveraged. So I said, listen, what we'll do is you take care of all the repairs and you buy everything to replace in the house. And you buy all the supplies and you do all the work. I'll market it. I'll be the one that puts the money up to purchase it. And then we're going to split the profit at the end. So the good thing about it is I was also super busy in my business at this time. So I leveraged everything. So like he is now tied to it because he's getting paid on what the actual sale price is going to be. I'm not like a customer anymore, we're a partner. So, time frame wise was really good. The other thing is he buddied up at Lowe's, and like Lowe's would have like, the president coming in, and they'd be like, hey, we got this dinged up like sheetrock that like needs to be off the floor. We'll give it to you for $1 a sheet. It was like, we have a bathtub, these have to go, we'll sell it to you for $50. And he was just, but I wouldn't have gotten that otherwise. I would have been paying for all of it other than we're partnered on it. So he did the work.
So what did you put down on that? You put the 140 in cash?
I bought it cash because this thing was kind of a disaster.
You put
so
the 140 up, that was your
I had a line of credit, so I took a line of credit on my house and I bought it with the line of credit. The nice part of the line of credit is it's short term, so you only have to pay on the interest on it. So we went on that, all in for both of us. We made 144 on it and then split that down the middle. Keep in mind, I didn't make 144. I paid the contractor, but he got 77 out of that. I got 77 out of that. We're all good.
love the idea that you didn't have to work to do because we just did a flip.
Right.
And that was the hardest part, is that you were also a general contractor.
Right.
And it would have been great to have a partner, and I would have leveraged it, and I get my piece, you get your piece, but you get the headache.
Right. And I mean, in some ways, maybe I would have made more. It would have cost me, I probably would have made more if I did this in GC, the whole thing, but that's time too, right? So it's all relative. Like on that model, I can do 2 or 3 of these at a time. You certainly can't do it the other way, right? So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you just say that the contractor spent what? The 61,000?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so he was buying like for the supplies and materials and all that. So he wasn't charging me for, he's charging labor for the guys that work for him, but all his labor's like free. So, and he was one of those guys that was like human shoe helpers. So like, you know, he's not just, you know, it was a really kind of a nice model. And I was like, so it worked out.
I could
really
offer
nice.
that to 2 contractors, I know, right?
Right. So what we did, this was the little tiny house. We expanded the back roof section. It was little. I mean, it was really kind of tight. We did this little bump out to put a master suite upstairs. Came out great. I mean, the siding, he sided this whole house for like under $5 grand. Yeah. He was like buying, you know, the materials cheap. Because he had a vested interest in doing this, you know, as cheap as he possibly could. So, yeah, exactly. And so there's changes that he made that I was like, oh, like, you know, because he came up with the idea of doing this because the architect had a different plan. I was like, came out great, right? So, so that one was a home run. This is the last one I did. So this was an MLS property for the last 2 years. And what's your takeaway when you see this house? It was listed as a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. What's the first thing you say if it's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath? Well, that, or like, this house is 2,000 square feet. How the hell is it 2,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath? So it's listed on the MLS as a single family. And I go, well, that doesn't look like a single family. So there was like a workshop below that they like used as a t-shirt shop, and they had it zoned as commercial in a residential zone. So I called up the agent, and it was listed for 255 or 275 or something. And I call up the agent and I say, hey, is that like, could that be zoned as like for a 2-family? She goes, you know what? My client's going down to town to talk to him about that this week. And I go, great. I go, how about this? I'll make you an offer for 255. It's a little bit less than you're at, but it's contingent on them turning into us coming to an agreement as a 2-family, and we'll split the fees for the lawyer. How about that? They said yes. So it took us like 6 months, I guess, to get the approval. I happen to know the Board of Adjustment attorney, so I called him up and I said, hey, Larry, I hope I'm not out of line here, but what do you think? Do you think this would go through? So think about your network here. And he said, hey, Jeremy, we talked about Rutgers for football for like 10 minutes. And then he's like, yeah, you know, I think you got a home run. So I'm like, I knew my $5,000 investment for the attorney was probably a good bet, right? Like it wasn't a home run. Like I didn't know it was going to be, you know, absolutely going to go through, but I invested that money, pretty much placed a bet that it was going to go through. The moment that thing turns into a 2-family, I'm immediately, you know, making much more on it, right? Versus a single family. So I bought for 255, and then we renovated the downstairs, which was a total blank space, which is this space. We turned it into the kitchen here. My contractor, which is the craziest shit. Like you hear about these places, pardon my language. He's like, he ripped out Bertazzoni and Bosch appliances from a building that they were making Uber luxury. So he sold me a Bertazzoni $5,000 range and a Bosch dishwasher for $800. Wow. Like, I mean, just stupid. Like, and then we came in, we renovated this, made it a 2-bedroom, and 2-bedroom. The upstairs was already finished. It was already a 2-bedroom apartment up top, and so. And we threw some shutters on it. It looks much nicer now. We landscaped and did some other stuff to it. And you know, all in on this, I bought this cash with the line of credit, so I didn't cash out of it. But if I did cash out of this, they would give me 20%. I would have to have 25% equity into the property. So to take 75% out, I would have zero money in on this if I wanted to. I would actually get a check for that, like probably covering my closing costs of $10,000, right? So. And when we went into it, I thought we'd get about $3,500 in rent. It ended up being $4,000 because over that year that we took us to do it, the rental went through the roof too. So, but this one was more complicated, right? Like now we have to get before a Board of Adjustments to do all these other things, right? So the idea is like you just keep laddering up and get a little more complicated with each step. Any questions on any of this?
I'm inspired.
Thoughts, takeaways?
I got a question.
Please.
For your line of credit, you're saying you're buying them for line of credit.
Yeah.
But you didn't pay that off. So now you're just paying interest on that. And then the home is paying for that home.
Yeah. So I'm in a fortunate position where I have the money just on the cash to do that. But I could have done, like, the nice part about a line of credit is, so that house that I bought to flip, no one could buy that without it being cash because, you know, you couldn't live in it. It wasn't habitable. But if you have a line of credit, perhaps on your primary, a lot of us, you know, if we have a primary home, the value's gone up. And so you can look into considering having a line of credit. I recommend that people get a line of credit when you don't need it, because when an opportunity comes around, you're not going to have 45 days to go get a line of credit. Like, just have it, and it doesn't cost you anything. It costs me $50 a year to maintain it. I did one called Third Federal, which is the lowest one. They're national. They're like a federal credit union. The lowest one I think I found in the country. They were really cheap. I still have one with investors that somehow hasn't shifted. That I had on the second house that we bought that didn't make me close it out. It's still at 3%. I'm like, when are they going to shift that on me?
Yeah.
So
And
taking advantage of
TV also has
yeah.
lower
So it's all about just having that there for if the opportunity presents itself, right? So, but to that point, I could have done a cash out refi and I would have got all my money back. You know, my cash flow wouldn't have been as good, but like that's what I've been focused on, right? So, you know, financing, I think, you know, this is what we talked about with the leverage of line of credit, owner financing. I mean, there's still people that are willing to, you know, do owner financing. That's not, you know, that's not as rare. I mean, you just need to ask for it. For us starting out, especially for, you know, young guys buying their first place, 3% down, you can do that on a multi too. If I had to do it over again, I would have put a 3% down on that first place so I could leverage onto another property all that much quicker. Because keep in mind, I don't have any property that's not, while I'm paying them down faster, I'm not doing it unless I'm cash flowing. Even if I'm only cash flowing 100 or 200 bucks, I want to make sure that I've got a little cushion in there. But that's been my goal throughout. So what I think is most important here is like, why aren't we doing this as agents, right? So like, unlike being a landscaper, like, and that's your business, like we're in this, like the investors are gonna be the first one to call is us when they find a deal or think they found something off market, right? They don't know all the numbers. So we have the advantage that we see the properties first, right? Like, you know, even if it's just on the MLS, you're gonna see on the hot sheet or whatever you guys have up here on a daily basis. You should know the market values and opportunities. So we should know what the rentals are for the markets we're working. We should know if we feel like something's under market, right? You know, I'm going to get to the next slide. When you purchase, you should be saving on money that other people aren't, right? Because even if you're buying a property as a buyer's agent, what are you going to be paid? 2%, 2.5%, 3%? Like you're going to be paid to buy a house. That's pretty cool, right? You know, look at it that way. And with your vendor relationships, you can save money. So here's a regular investor, right? They're going to buy a $300,000 house and they're going to sell it for $500,000, right? They're going to flip this house, right? They're going to have a home inspection, right? Who here refers to a home inspector? Refers more than 3 or 4 a year. Okay. Are you going to buy an investment property? Are you most likely going to get inspection, you know, request taken care of by the seller? Sometimes, most of the time not. You're buying a short sale. Are you going to get anything from the bank for a foreclosure? You're not going to get anything. So calling your inspector, say, hey, I want you to walk this property with me. I want to just make sure I'm not missing anything. But hey, I've sent you 4 or 5 deals this year. You know, like, are they going to charge you? My inspector wasn't charging me, right? Because I'm taking it. You come whenever you want. I just need an hour. Can you just run through this with me? You know, be my safeguard here, right? So tank sweep, same thing. You refer to your tank sweep guy. Should be saving money there. Attorney. I mean, my attorney didn't send me a bunch of deals, but anytime I send him a personal deal, he does it for me for free, right? Like, think about like how we have this ecosystem is done. And then we're going to get paid on the commission, right? So we're going to save on the commission on the purchase. So if it's on the market, and when we sell it, we're also saving that piece too. So we're going to, of course, co-broke it out, but we're also saving on that piece, right? So your cost here to the average investor is going to be about $28,000 on this deal. So for us, you know, we're not paying the inspection. We're not paying the tank sweep. We're getting paid on the buyer side commission. We're not going to pay for the attorney. And then we get a commission of $12,500 or less than $12,000. So our total cost is about $5 grand. We're saving $23,000 if we're an actual real estate agent. Does this make sense? I mean, granted, you're not going to ask a home inspector to do this for free if you're not referring them, right? And you're not going to do this on an attorney. But for the agents that are doing like some, you know, reasonable amount of business, like that's not a hard ask, right? If you send your attorney 5 deals a year or more, and he doesn't offer at least a discount on this, you probably want to get a different attorney unless he's sending you deals. Am I right? Is anything I'm saying wrong here? And then it just comes down to the multiplicity of leverage. So have we heard about people argue about stocks are better than real estate and real estate's better than stocks? Have you heard this argument? Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you can still argue that 100% leveraged real estate, if you went in and bought it cash, you know, maybe there are years that stocks are better and maybe years that real estate's better. But the power of real estate is in the leverage piece, right? So if we're talking about buying a $200,000 property outright in cash, and it goes up 10%, what's our gain?
20,000.
20,000, right? So what if we buy a house for 400,000 and we put down 200,000?
40,000.
Goes to 40,000. What if we buy two properties at 400,000? We put down 25% on each property. Where are we at? 80,000. That's just the really basic leverage, right? Like, does that all make sense? It's all simple arithmetic, right? So when we talk about going into, buying real estate, it's all in the leverage, right? You're not buying these properties cash. You're buying the leverage, and as things appreciate, as they've done dramatically in the last 3 years, you're not getting, if you've got 20% down and the property goes up by 10%, your investment now is going up fivefold from that, right? Because you own the whole property. The whole property is going up 10%, not your piece on that, right? If it was a stock, it would just be your piece. Does that all make sense, everybody? Like the power of this? So over time, here's the power of leverage. We have our equity grows, right? Our investment in it stays the same. Like we put down that 20%, but our debt on the property is going down because what's happening? We're paying off our mortgage every year, right? The cool thing when we talk about inflation is when I buy a property and I lock in on a 30-year mortgage and it's at 3%, does my payment change very much? What's the only thing that changes in that?
Taxes.
My taxes. But I mean, taxes aren't going up 10% a year, right? I mean, unless something really goes haywire with the town, they're going up 2-3% or something, not a whole lot. So over time, what happens? The debt's totally paid off. The other thing is when we pay off our debt, we don't recognize that. We think about us paying our mortgage and we think that's like all going away. Like, sure, there's an interest piece of that, but what's the other piece? There's interest and there's principal. Who gets that principal? Well, the principal, I'm paying it down. It's a credit card I can't access like that, but that principal's back to me. Like right now, I went to a 2% interest loan. Like I have 2%. Like even from day one, I'm paying down more principal than interest, right? Like that's money that's, not today money, but it's whenever I want to actually cash out of this house. That's my principal. Like, so that mortgage isn't just all debt, right? Like, does that all make sense? Is it all resonating with everybody? So, when we talk about a rental property, it's the same thing. So you have your vacancy and expenses. I've had properties now, this is going on the 15 years. I've not had vacancy for more than a month. And so here's the thing that I resonate, like I explained to everyone. So who here has had someone who's nervous about buying a property because of a bad experience in the past? Anyone, like a family member or something that says, whatever you do, don't invest in real estate? The first question I ask them is I say, so your uncle, had a terrible experience, right? I go, how long was that property on the market for rent before he rented it? And 9 times out of 10, they'll tell me that it took them 2, 3, 4 months to rent the property. What happens when it takes 2, 3, 4 months to rent a property? Who do you rent to? You rent to anyone, exactly. You actually choose to rent to someone that you shouldn't have rented to in the beginning. The key on renting real estate is put it on the market at market or slightly below market value. And the reason for that is you'll get the pick of the litter with the people that are coming in with 750, 800 credit scores that both are working jobs. Their debt to income on what it's going to cost them to rent is, 20% or something. You have no problem. I've not had one late payment from a renter in the time I've had because when I go and I put the property on the market, I get 10 applications. I pick the best one. I don't have to talk to them. I also make sure that the property is done at the get-go. If the property is in good shape from the start, you're not getting calls from your tenants on fixes. That's the part that would drive me crazy, right? We're trying to build a passive business, not an active business. The only calls I get, withstanding a couple over over a decade, is appliances. That's the only thing I need is appliances, but they break down every 3 or 4 years, right? That's it. And they call the appliance people, they deal with them, I give them the credit card over the phone, and that's it. So if we're taking care of our properties and not being a slumlord and keeping really nice properties and putting it at market rent, we will not have issues with tenants. Does that all make sense? If you are going and trying to be greedy and you say, every unit has listed in here as rented for $1,600, now I want $1,750. Well, guess what? Like you're going to end up taking a month and a half to rent the property. Whatever gain you had is gone because you should have had it rented for that one. And you probably choose to put a tenant in where you shouldn't have had in the first place, right? Like, so when you talk to investors, please emphasize that. Yes?
What do you think about home warranty
I think they're fine, but I mean, so with a lot of my properties, I renovated the whole thing. So all my stuff was relatively new. The problem with the home warranty plans is they're only as good as the vendors that they have, and some of the vendors aren't great, and I'd rather just choose my own vendors. So that's where I'm at with it.
Is it possible that we get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, sure. I can email them to Alicia and then she can send them out to them. Thank you. So just to move on. So best time to buy real estate, just buy real estate and wait. So the thing that everyone talks about is, all right, so maybe we're at, some kind of historic highs. Who knows? Tomorrow it could go another 3 years. We just don't know. But we do know it's going back to 2007, 2006. This is a median house price, and then it dropped like crazy. What didn't drop like crazy? This one is your median rent. What happens when we hit a recession?
Rents go up.
Rents tend to go up because what happens is if you remember hearing on the radio about Lehman Brothers and everything else, are you pretty nervous about buying a house at this point because if your job is great? Like 2008, 2009, I don't think anyone felt secure in a job. So what do they do instead if they get a new job? They're choosing to rent. So in that time frame, while my real estate value of that first property went down dramatically, was I selling it? No. But what went up dramatically? My rents. So when we're talking about an inflationary environment, this is really important to think about. So, when I talk about real estate, that's why I say don't sell real estate, only buy real estate. The only time that you can really get in trouble is if you bought a property from the get-go that was not cash flowing, because we should not be seeing rents going down, right? As long as that's cash flowing and you don't have to sell because you financially leverage yourself too much, you're not going to lose. Like historically, there's never been a time in our lives over a long period that you're going to lose in real estate. So when we talk about inflationary periods, I couldn't find even more outdated, but when we talk about inflation, the difference with the inflation is housing prices will rise with inflation, right? But if we're leveraged, our piece doesn't change. So if I bought a house at 3% interest rate or whatever, even if it's 5% interest rate, my monthly payment on that is not changing, right? But what is changing if I'm renting it out? What goes up when the inflation goes up? The rents go up. What else goes up during that? Cash flow and the value of the property. All those things are going up. So that's why we talk about real estate as a hedge to inflation. So mortgage payments do not change over time, but inflation means the money paid back to the future is worth less. So the money you're paying back, you're locking into the bank that I'm paying you $2,000 a month for my mortgage. Inflation's going up, but they're not saying to me, oh, now you got to pay me $2,100. That's still locked in at $2,000. But my rents are not. My rents are going to continue to go up. Does that make sense? And so, rents are going to continue steady upwards. There's no question about that. The piece we're not going to talk about, because we talk about a whole day on this, is you also have the tax benefits. So the property that you buy, you essentially are depreciating this property. So in our government's mind, for some reason, even though we're appreciating, they're believing that this property is losing value over time. So over a 27.5-year period, you're depreciating. You can't depreciate the land because the land doesn't change, but you're depreciating the value of the property you bought. So from a tax perspective, you're writing off the taxes every year on that value. So you're also having, if you're in a commission-based income, we get slammed by taxes, right? But you can offset your taxes dramatically through real estate. So that's the last piece. There's experts that I would talk about that. So this is what it looks like from a long term. We're only talking about 6 properties, one of which I live in, so I don't even really consider that as much of an asset. But over time, by buying these down, we build up the equity over time to 2.4 million because of appreciation, or because the tenant's paying it down. So, and this is taking out what the initial investment and the repairs were. So this is what the equity of each of these is. More importantly, my goal along this was to build up my cash flow along with this. So my monthly cash flow for all these properties is about $10,000 a month. So annually, it's about $116,000 on a year. The other piece about this, don't forget, is we have the principal reduction, right? So I can tap into that principal reduction by doing a cash out refi or doing a line of credit. So with that, we're also paying $6,000 a month. Am I touching that every year? Is that coming in my bank account? No, but that's my money. So that's another $70,000 in principal reduction. Does that all make sense? But eventually these properties will just all be paid off. So and it doesn't take much. I mean, you're only talking about 6 houses across the board over a timetable of we're looking at 15 years. But like, the thing is just get this snowball started, right? Like this was a terrible investment, I'd say. But it's not a terrible investment. I mean, I say that like tongue in cheek because now it's all paid off, right? Like you're always going to win as long as you have a long enough time frame. So we just go back to it, some other resources. Is anyone familiar with Bigger Pockets? That's where I started. I think it's amazing. You can go in there and do a search for wholesaling, Airbnb, short-term rentals. There's a ton of Facebook books and Facebook groups on every topic we're talking about. There's different real estate investor groups. I'm actually launching one in Morristown. If anyone wants to come, it's going to be on a monthly basis. We're going to talk about, just initially, we're going to start it. So we're just talking about all different types of investments. So it'll be short-term rentals. It's going to be buy and hold investments. It's like, we're going to do it as unbranded in case you guys ever want to do it in your market center. So we're going to have it in a separate space that's not in Keller Williams. So we're going to call it like, growth real estate or something, like whatever. And we're going to be able to invite other agents and other potential clients and have this as just a network thing. This is just for us to all learn about ways to invest in real estate. That's just building a community out that way. And then the other part is just making sure to be reading, tons of real estate books in the niche that you're most interested in. So the last part of this, like, if you sat through all this, my goal was for you to really think about what you would want to do for yourself. I gave you that sheet in front of you. Like, I would, really try to think about, when you think about your business planning, like, what is the type of property that you might want to consider? Do you have someone that's like a brother or someone that's a contractor that you can make that deal with, on the flip side, and looking at it from that perspective? You have someone in your life that's a contractor that maybe you trust that you can go that direction with. Maybe you've got a parent, uncle, grandparent, family friend that's got money and is afraid about this inflationary environment. Maybe you don't have the money, but you can have a conversation with them to say, hey, listen, I'd be happy to take a loan and pay you 7% over a year time frame because I don't have the money to do this. This is what I'm looking to do. Or if you're worried about paying on the interest, say, hey, we'll go in on this and we're going to split it 3 ways. We're going to have the contractor, we have the investor, and we have the marketer, the guy who's identify the property and sell the property, which is a real estate. Don't forget, like in that example I showed you, you're bringing $25,000 of value to the table. So you're an asset to that as well. So just start thinking about that property. If you get brought into a listing appointment the next week and you say, hey, these people really want out, there's a ton of like equity in this property, it needs to be redone. I mean, maybe there's someone in this office that you can partner with and you learn off of that deal and you get a piece of that, pie because of a finder's fee. So, I mean, go through, I would start thinking about what's the vehicle and the way to do it. So, and who are the key decision makers? So a lot of times for me, like my wife and I, when we started, she was very risk averse, right? So she wasn't really on board with this stuff. But over time, she's been my sounding board. Now, when I go find a property, she's like, hey, just go, like, I trust you, go for it. And I'd say, like, no, I want you to look at it because now I'm the anxious one because she's, become so much less risk averse. So if you have someone in your life that says, hey, I'm not on board with this, start having that conversation with, your wife, your significant other, whoever that might be, if you want to invest with a parent or something. So was this helpful? I mean, I'm here for questions. I know we're over by 15 minutes because we started 15 minutes late. So, oh, it's the one? All right, so perfect. So that's great. So what questions came up through, please fill out as you can. Like, I have agents in my office now that are like have this like right in their cube, and this is like the focus that they want to do. I do think it's really important to talk to those decision makers in your life because sometimes it's someone, if they don't have the information and don't know the benefits of investing, you might want to have this conversation and cast a vision for them to get them on board. So what questions can we answer about anything investment-wise? Anyone?
What's your thought on buying condos?
Yeah, so I think with condos, they tend to be harder to cash flow because keep in mind, you've got your maintenance fees, you've got your whatever the HOA fees are. It all depends. I think what's critical and the best muscle we can start to exercise is looking at different communities and different properties and starting looking at them. So they hit the MLS, and you see a property that's like a 2-bedroom condo and it's 300. Well, find out what the rents are. And so maybe the rents are 2,500. And then run that calculator and say, can this possibly cash flow if the property is at 20% down, right? That's what you need to start thinking about from an investment standpoint. I do not believe that every property I've bought, I've never based upon appreciation. You always have to look at the numbers and the real world numbers because we are starting to see multifamilies that sell for numbers that make absolutely no sense, right? Like, it's fine if you want to live in one and you want to build some equity because you can buy a bigger house by living in one or the other, but from an pure investment standpoint, it's not going to be a winning asset. So there's nothing wrong with condos. It just, you have to look at it from the cash flow perspective. And I think the nice part about condos is it's a really easy place to start, right? Because you're only responsible for what's inside the walls. So you don't have to worry about, like, the first place I bought was totally turnkey. And that was a great start for me when I was younger and I didn't know anything about real estate. So, you know, while my returns on it weren't as good, each one got better as they got a little bit more complicated, right? So, I mean, if nothing else, it's a great place to start.
The scary part is the assessment for if building gets realized.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that comes down to, you know, it's helpful to know if someone in the community, you have to have the conversations with, you know, the property manager, or sometimes they don't want to give you that information if you're not an owner there. But, you know, you can also tell, you know, basic things. Like in my neighborhood, there's a townhouse community that's all wood that was built in the 80s. And I mean, the assessments are through the roof because they have to go through and re-side all these and redo all the decks, where you can kind of tell, like, versus buying one that was in the vinyl siding, like, you're not gonna have to deal with it. I mean, vinyl's vinyl, right? So there's sometimes you can look at it and say, well, if these roofs haven't been done, it's 20 years, like, you can also, as an agent, look and say, this special assessment is probably coming, versus some garden apartments that are all brick, you know, they'll probably be fine for 100 years. So, I mean, you know, you just have to do your research there. Other questions, thoughts?
Please, what's your general thought on the traditional rental as opposed to Airbnb?
It's all going to be like market specific. Yeah. So like in Morristown, I've like looked into it because I have, with those two little houses, the front house is going to be available. And I was like, what a cute Airbnb. Yeah. And my market doesn't make sense. Like I've looked at it and I go, I just can't make these numbers work. Like I'll rent it for maybe $600 or $800 more a month. But I'm like, for me, the activity, the active side of that doesn't really excite me because I'm like, I'm gonna have to do turnover every couple of days. I'm like, I just don't want to deal with it. Okay. Other markets are absolutely crush it with Airbnb. Yeah. So my friend who's up in Ludlow, that's a great Airbnb market. I had no idea. It's a tiny little spot. But you know, first year, you know, she was getting a $350,000 house that she bought. She had like $55,000 in rentals and only rented it out 3 of the bedrooms instead of 5 because she didn't have a cleaner there. So like this year, she's going to totally clean up. Yeah. You know, obviously there's more investment on those because they're active and you have cleaners more regularly. Yeah. It just really comes down to market specifics. Yeah. The thing about Airbnbs that you have to be careful of is they're starting to crack down on them. Yeah. So you have to be clear on that. I had a client, a young guy who's like 26, and he house hacked. And so what he did, he got a house, he lived in the 1 bedroom, and he had 2 bedrooms that are almost identical, and he had another bedroom. And so he put the one on Airbnb that was identical to the other one, and he rented it out. And his neighbor across the street got pissed because when they lived on the street, they didn't really build out a cul-de-sac. It just kind of came to a dead end. And he had like 4 cars there. And he reported him like to the town. And like, so Morristown Airbnb policy was because of my client. Like literally there's an article in the newspaper all about it. Because like, and his point was like, hey, like, you know,
higher end towns are like Richmond's already banned it like 3
right.
years ago.
And I mean, his points are valid because I mean, it doesn't matter. Like you just have to look at it from an investment standpoint. But he's like, listen, there's no place for these young professionals to get a place for under $1,000 for $1,000 a month. Yeah. So he's like, where else are they going to go? And the town put policies in place where you have to register them and do all these things.
Like this for me, I'm an interior designer. My father's an architect and a construction company.
Yeah. And
we were thinking about going like out west. Yep. And almost making it more, I mean, obviously much more less expensive, but making it like a destination spot, like from New York. And I mean, if you rent it out for a week and a half, you're making way more than you ever could. Yeah.
I mean, there's a show, and I'm like, I always kind of cringe when people are like, oh, this real estate show, right? But no, there is a show that's called, I forget, but it's an all better Airbnb show. And it's like they have the designer marketing guy, and they have the designer woman and the marketing guy. And they had one that was the bedroom community of New York. It was like antique, it was like Hudson or something. And I saw it, and I was like, you saw the legitimate rental. I was like, I mean, they're killing it. So I mean, there's even like bedroom communities, like for antiquing in upstate New York. That's what I'm kind of looking at now, is to find these little spots out of the city that are open to it, right? So, but you just really need to be careful because I've also been looking at lake communities out like Poconos, and they have things that are literally insane. The listings, like communities reviewing short-term rentals right now. Okay. So I mean, some of these places you get crushed if you bought it and a year later they changed it. And keep in mind, if you look at these numbers in the last 2 years, Airbnbs have been up like especially around here, like you wouldn't believe. So you just need, if you're working off of historical numbers, they may be a little bit inflated for what they're saying. Other questions? No, please.
Elizabeth, she said, what is his overall elimination decision process when deciding whether or not to buy or list?
Elimination process really comes down to, one is it has to be the right time in my life to actually be purchasing the property. It has to make sense just from a look. Like for me, I've been very much focused on location. So all my properties, withstanding the last one, are within like 2 miles of my house. The other one's 20 minutes drive. So that's important to me. That's not for everyone. Some people are going to go into totally different markets and do really well. So it has to play into your investment strategy. And then we as agents should be able to tell what the ARV on this property is. So if they really want to be done with this house and they will take $350 tomorrow and I can sell it for 400, is it worth it for me? So it really comes down to your investment strategy. The key is on any of this, it has to cash flow. And I always like to look at it and say that there's an upside for me doing the work to it. So I can get both pieces of that. You get the cash flow and the equity piece. So there's no hard and fast answer there. So they talked about this 1% rule, which is the idea of you getting 1% of your property value on a monthly basis from a rental standpoint. That last house I showed meets that criteria. It's very, very, very hard to find that anymore. So there are calculators or different ways. Bigger Pockets is great for showing you different ways to analyze real estate and real estate investments. So just start looking at that because they talk about cap rates and various things that don't really translate well for small residential stuff. The other piece I would say with that is make sure that you are the expert, right? Because we'll see things on the MLS that'll show rents. They go, there's no way that's the rent. They might be renting it to their brother and inflating these rents. And other times you look at it and go, how is it only $1,500 for a 2-bedroom? You're like, there's an opportunity there because there might be two units that they're renting for $3,000 and it really should be $4,000 just because they haven't taken little updates to the property. So that's the other thing is don't trust MLS data at all. Do your own research and know the market, right? The best thing you can start doing is analyzing properties, like just doing that rigorously. If you're talking about, the condo investment, going into those communities, say, what do they rent for? What is it purchase for? And you can go through all different condo communities and look at that. And that's really simple because you can find rentals in condo communities. Similarly, you're going to do the same with multifamilies and single families to get a sense of that. So I think the single family rental market is going to be very strong for very long because we don't have houses and there's a lot of people that will be renting. I think that's going to stay strong for any foreseeable future. Other questions? Anyone else? Does anyone have an intention on what they want to do that they would be willing to share from an investment standpoint? You mentioned about doing something out west with your brother. Seems like a logical fit. Anyone else, please?
Yeah, I'm considering
Yeah. Because in the long term, the fix and flip. So the problem with doing the fix and flips is if you sell it in a short term, your tax obligation, it eats up a lot of the money that you're making, a lot of the profit there. So if you have the opportunity to hold it in the long term, you're gonna do well. The reason there's the one that I flipped, and for me it just didn't make sense. That rental market wasn't such that I rent that house for enough to make it worth my while, and it was a little bit further from me, so it didn't make sense for that model. It really comes down to each property, but the biggest response that I've gotten from flippers that have been doing this for a decade plus is, I wish I kept more properties. And some of that might be the fact that maybe you flip 3 and you hold 1, right? Because you need to have the cash to do the next one, but having an intention to hold along the way, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes that quick money is really, exciting, but that sacrifice for the long term, like anyone who bought a house 3 years ago and flipped it is kicking themselves right now, right? I mean, in a long term, you're always going to get paid off. I mean, maybe we have a downturn for the next 10 years, but if you're holding on to that property and it is cash flowing, it's going to be paid off, in good order. So
I think flips are going to be hard to sell going forward too.
Yeah,
I think because at the beginning it was professionals, people that had knowledge.
Right.
Now it's anyone that has an extra $30,000
Yeah.
And like I've heard nightmares where people, they redid the kitchens and took the grout, poured it down the basement sink. And, 3 months later, they bought the house and the whole entire house backed up because the grout, and I think people are becoming more aware, unknowledgeable people are doing flips.
Yeah, I've had listing opportunity that I walked away with because I was like, I put my name on this. I don't want to read in a newspaper for 2 years from now that the house burned down. Like I just, we got to choose our ethics over the business and money. What were you gonna say, sir?
No, I was just to buy any multi-family, even if it's a two-family, where you come up with that 20% down. So the flipping might help. Okay, like you said, get the cash flow and buy the rent.
Well, I mean, the other things that I look at too is we're the real estate professional, right? So one friend of mine who has an investment business, when he started, like he went from a corporate world into investing. And he started showing things on Instagram and Facebook on what he was doing. Like people all in his network, because he came from a corporate background, right? All their money was in 401ks. They were like, I want to be invested in real estate, but I don't have the first clue. They were throwing money at him to invest because they said, oh, you have this opportunity. I've got $50,000 sitting around. I don't know what to do with it. So he started partnering with them to get it going forward. And then once that got forward enough, then he started doing it all on his own. So, and he's still doing it with investors, but then he's also doing stuff on his own as well. You can do that from a multi standpoint as well, right? You can go in and just build that model where you have different partners involved. So maybe there's you and 2 other partners that are going into it. And you explain to them, hey, we're going to have a discount right off the base that I'm going to be sharing with you because we're going to be buying this at a 2.5% discount. Normally, you would have a property manager and you'd be paying the property manager 10%. I'm your property manager now, but you don't have to pay me, but I get the equity in the property. Like we're all business owners. So think about it as a business owner. Like how are and also we're going to do work to it. So I'm going to oversee the contractors and be the GC of it because you guys are both working at your accounting firms and don't want to be bothered with it. I'm not bringing the money to the table. You're bringing more of the money piece, but I'm going to be bringing this piece in, and that's my equity, right? So, I mean, if you build a nice deal, like they won't have any trouble, like sending money your way. Does that make sense? Yeah. But that's what he was doing. I mean, like that, they're coming to us. There's plenty of people I guarantee in your network that'd be happy to give you money, especially in an inflationary environment. Looking at a safe harbor for the money because everyone wants to be in real estate for that reason right now. Anything else? We're at 1 o'clock. I'm happy to stick around for any questions that you don't want to ask for anyone else. And I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope you're inspired and you go do something. That's the biggest thing. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time. Cheers.